Good morning, my name's Ian Smith. Thank you again for joining me for another installation guide. Today we're going to be discussing the Sonus SBC media gateway. Like we did with the Ferrari one previously, what we're going to do is we're going to run through how to set one of these Sonus SBCs up. We're going to set it up for both SIP trunking and also for an ISDN E1, or for the American people, an ISDN T1. Very straightforward. We'll start with the SIP trunking element first. My SIP trunk today is courtesy of my usual vendor, PureIP. They provide me with a SIP trunk into my lab, which is great. And then the ISDN, we're going to route that in and essentially call that pass-through. Also, as well, within the guide, we're going to look at using the gateway as a medium for transversing calls between your new link environment and essentially a legacy PBX. And what I mean by this is some PBXs, or majority I guess, can't take direct SIP connection into them. So what we will do is, if a legacy PBX user tries to call a link user, we'll use the gateway as the actual vehicle to actually pass that call through. And equally the other way around, if a link user tries to ring a legacy PBX user, the gateway will send the call back through the E1 connection to the PBX. So in the back of our gateway, like I say, it's an SBC 1000 media gateway I'm using today. There's two E1 connections in the back. The port 1 will be the presentation from the PSTN vendor, so that'll connect straight into there. Port 2 will then daisy chain through back to your PBX. So essentially all we're doing is putting the gateway in the middle. In the professional terms, this is what we class as putting a gateway upstream in a topology. Also, as well, it means that we can fork calls off to link and to PBX based on normalization rules. So to start with, there's a couple of things we need to do. One is we need to add our media gateway into our link topology to ensure that link is aware of it and we can actually send calls from outer link to the gateway. And equally, the opposite way around, that the link environment will accept calls from the gateway to route to a link user. So we'll start with that. So just essentially before we start, it's probably worth mentioning the tools of the trade today. So as I've stated, I'm using a Sonus SBC 1000. This particular gateway I'm using today doesn't have an SBA element on it, so it hasn't got this survivable branch appliance. There is many guides out on the internet which will tell you how to configure an SBA anyway, so very, very straightforward, and like I say, the guides are readily available. By default comes with two E1s on the back of it, so that's a standard. The link environment I'm using today is a standard edition environment. There's quite a bit in it, so I've been adding other elements to it while I've been going along with other guides. So it's just a basic standard edition. So all I've got powered up in my lab today is a domain controller, a standard edition front end, and a Windows 8 client to actually present the call. The headset I'm talking to you on today is the Plantronics Blackwire 710. This is their premium end single-eared headset. Hope I'm coming through loud and clear. It's a really nice headset, and one I'd recommend you to at least try or trial, because they're excellent headsets. Just again on this SIP trunk providing, this is through my regular vendor, PureIP. Excellent provision in the UK for SIP trunking. Myself, I use them for a majority of our professional customers. We've never had an issue with them, and certainly one I'd be highly recommending you take a look at. So okay, so with that out of the way, let's start. So I'm going to just jump to my link front end. I've already taken the courtesy of firing up the topology. I just need to actually download it now. So I'm going to click on Action, Download Topology. It asked me to save it, so I'm just going to overwrite the previous one. Yeah, to that. Let me just wait for this to open up. Okay, so in my environment, my SIP domain is northernlink.co.uk, but my internal environment is northernlink.local. So very quickly just going to go down the left-hand side. So just to give you, I should have said this a little bit earlier, but just to give you the full picture, PureIP is sending the information to myself from from the cloud or the PureIP environment on port 5060. That's coming into my home lab, and I'm NATing that 5060 into my lab. Equally, PureIP are aware that I'm going to be sending them calls from my lab on port 5060. So bidirectional, both ways. 5060 is the port presentation for my SIP trunk. So in Link 2013, the gateway components are now in the shared components folder. So we need to go to PSTN gateways. As you can see, I've already got a few in there. The one I'm going to be interested in today, and I've already added it actually, is this one here. So that is 192.168.1.220. As you can see, it's in there as a gateway. It's already talking to my Link front-end mediation server, and in the trunks, as you can see, I'm talking on 5060. So what we'll do is we'll just going to delete that out of the topology, just so I can actually add it in and show you that again. Just for your interest, while we're waiting for that to publish, the other gateways and trunks here is the first one, the 83, is a direct SIP trunk from PureIP. The second one coming down is my firewall IP address, and the third one is the Ferrari virtual appliance, which I did a video guide on a couple of weeks ago. So I've removed the actual gateway from the topology now. So let's just jump back into PSTN. I'm going to right-hand click on new ISPN, sorry, IP PSTN. The IP address. So I always, as a rule of thumb, always put the IP address and not the FQDN name. The reason for that is I've seen, certainly if you was doing direct SIP into Cisco Call Manager, certainly Call Manager struggles a little bit with having it as a fully qualified domain name into the, and that's just due to a couple of things. One is the Call Manager not being set up with a DNS server to actually resolve the name, or the limitations on the version of the Call Manager causing it not to work. So my general rule of thumb is I always use IP addresses and not the FQDN. So the IP address of our media gateway, which we'll go into in a second, is 192.168.1.220. We'll OK that. We're using IPv4. We are going to be talking on TCP. We're not going over secure. I'm going to change that to 5060, and our associated mediation server. So I'm co-located on my standard front end, so that is the only one in that option. And the mediation port is 5060. So like I said, we're going to be talking both inbound and outbound on 5060. Need to finish that. As you can see, it's added it in. It's put all our details in. It's now in our trunk as well. So now let's just topology and let's publish that back in. Great. Okay, so now at this point we're ready. We've finished our link environment type stuff. Another bit of housekeeping I usually like to do at this moment is I always try and I always try and restart the service on the mediation part. It's just from experience of doing these deployments before that. Many times that you think you've got everything set up right and everything's working fine, but for some reason calls don't work, and it always comes down to the mediation service hasn't restarted. So rule of thumb again, just restart your mediation server and it just brings everything back into sync. Okay, so let's just minimize all that. So we're kind of done with the link environment at the moment. One thing we do need to do, just while we're on link, is let's just jump into the control panel, because what I want to do is I want to tell the link environment that anybody making a call from their link client needs to present that to the actual mediation server, needs to present that to the media gateway to send it out. At the moment, it will be set that it's still trying to talk to the Ferrari appliance. So just need to change that. So let's just jump into control panel and have a look at the dial plan and voice policy and routing. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to go to the voice routing. As you can see, I've got just my one voice, my one dial plan. It's very straightforward, this one. If it starts with a 0 on any digits, then take the 0 off and put +44 and send it out on E164 format. Voice policy, I'm just using the global one. I haven't put any additional ones in there. If this is, just before I move on, if this is something of interest to anybody who wants to know more about policies, routing and trunk configuration, etc., do leave me a comment on the blog site, because I'm quite happy to spend a bit of time doing another visual guide on how to set up the voice routing. I know this is something of interest and something of what people have actually said to me is a little bit more of essentially a black art on how to do. So quite happy to spend a bit of time and probably do a full video guide on how to set up the voice routing elements of Link if needed. So moving on, like I say, using the global one here, the PSTN usage, the usual default Link 1's internal local long distance. If I was doing this on a client site, they'd be removed straight away before I do anything. I've never ever used the default ones provided by Microsoft. So again, all this PSTN usage is saying is it's associated with a route and the policy of the global. So just jumping into the route, double click, and this is saying if the number starts +44, which we know it does because we put that in our dial plan to normalize, then do something with it. And at the moment it's saying send it out to a trunk of 192.168.1.63, which is actually the Ferrari appliance. So just going to click on remove that and click on add. Click on our Sonus gateway, which is .220. OK that, commit, and commit all. And that will now be sat in there as connected. Great, so we are literally done on that. So we will be able to use that later on. So again, experience tells me, that I'm just going to restart the mediation service just to make sure everything is in sync. Where are you? There you are. If you can hear a humming or a background noise as well, it's not the headset, it's actually the Sonus SBC spinning up. I think on this particular model it's got 6 fans running out of one side of it, which are quite noisy. Okay, so let's just come out of that. I can minimize the front end now because there's nothing else to do on there at this moment. We will come back to it because we will essentially start the login on that just to make sure we can see the calls going through when we get to it. So I'm just going to go back to Internet Explorer now. So this is our portal for the Sonus SBC. So it's probably worth mentioning that if you was unboxing one of these as a brand new appliance, powering it up, your default gateway into port 1 on the front of an SBC 1000 is 192.168.129.2. Once you go onto that on the web browser, you'll see an initial startup page. On that initial startup page, that will allow you to add your IP address or your preferred IP address. Also, as well, it'll allow you to add a secondary IP address and a username and password. Also, the domain you're talking to and any DNS servers. I've already done that because I couldn't actually demonstrate that because I was wanting to do this video guide at the same time, and I couldn't make them both work at the same time. As you can see, this is quite a good, interesting one. So SBC 1000, SBC 2000. SBC 1000s are usually catering for small to medium businesses. So this is, getting up to 300-400 users. It's more primarily based on the number of concurrent SIP connections what are coming through the SBC. The SBC 2000 is a bit more heavyweight, can take more SIP connections through. It's got bigger processor, more RAM, etc., etc. Also on the back of the SBC 2000, it's got expandable ports which can go up to 16 E1 or T1 ports on the back, which for some customers is ideal. It's probably worth mentioning that the more E1 ports you have, the more expensive the gateway becomes. Traditionally, you buy the E1s in blocks of 4. Okay, so a little bit of knowledge there on Sonus. Again, for ourselves, certainly within Modality Systems where I work, Sonus is our preferred gateway. The reason why we like the Sonus appliance is really solid infrastructure, good devices. The returns or the issues with the devices are rare. The supportability from Sonus is excellent, and the configuration and issue finding, if there ever is any, is fairly straightforward. So, yeah, really good, solid appliance, and definitely, like I say, Modality's preferred one. But equally, I'm quite impressed with the Ferrari one, which I saw last week as well. If you was going to ask me what my second or third, I guess, appliance would be, is I'll rephrase that a different way actually. What would be my least favourite would definitely be Dialogic and audio codes. Personally, I don't like both of them. I find audio codes installation quite clunky. I find the support non-existent in the UK. If there was an issue on an audio codes gateway, it has to be shipped out of China. Also, as well, if you have to ring up support, you are actually going back to Israel to do the support. There's no support in the UK. So for myself personally, I like to steer clear of audio codes gateways. Dialogic, they just seem to be going out of the market a little bit now. I don't know, or I don't hear of anybody ever installing Dialogics in the UK anymore. That might be different for the US, but certainly for the UK, that's the understanding at the moment. Anyway, let's move on. So I'm going to click on Enter. I'm going to put in a username and password. So I've already set this. The reason why I set it as Modality is because I was going to ship this back to Modality once I finish with it. So just accept the messages. Yes. So that's just Java complaining that I need to trust it on the gateway. So this is the front screen, what you're presented with. Let's just jump to System and give a bit of an overview. So as I say, I'm running SBC 1000 version 3.0.0. That's actually out of date now. There is actually a 3.0.2 now available, but I haven't upgraded this actual appliance. I'm happy with 3.0. Uptime's 48 minutes. That's when I powered it on this morning. As I say, no ASM. That's the SBA element. Because this is I factory reset this morning, it's defaulted to T1 ISDNs. We can change that to E1s. It's just a change in the actual appliance. It's got 4 fax ports in this particular one. The Ethernet 1 port, which is port 1, is what I'm talking and you're viewing through now. I haven't actually set up port 2 at this moment. A couple of bits based on licensing and modules around the left-hand side, which tells you what's active and what's not active. A couple of stats, as you can see, like I say, it's factory reset this morning, so there's nothing gone through it at this moment. And that's it for the overview, really. Let's just jump to settings, because this is where you're going to probably spend more of your task. In fact, just before we go to settings, let's just jump to tasks. So tasks is where you would do a little bit of the setup. So if I wanted to reset this, I'd click on this reset button here and click OK, factory reset it. You can also do a partial factory reset, which actually flattens or gets rid of all the configuration but leaves the IP address intact and the username and password. Usually, though, the rule of thumb is always, if you're going to blitz your configuration, do a factory reset to give it a good clean. Back up your configuration is simply back it up. It stores it as a tar file locally, and you can restore. One word of warning, though, if you're using an SBC 1000 and you might have an SBC 2000 in another site, don't think you can actually back up a 1000 to place it into a 2000 or vice versa, 2000 into a 1000. Doesn't work. Also as well, I've had people ask me if the actual tar file holds an XML file, which is a configuration. Is there any way you can hack the XML file to make it be compatible with each version? Absolutely not. Even if you change the IP address within the XML file, so you can actually even get onto the gateway, because that's the first point you struggle with when you try and load an SBC 2000 config into a 1000. You can't actually get onto the gateway. It just doesn't simply work. It's not made to work. Sonus never made that as a requirement, or certainly something they add on their roadmap to make it interop between configs. So just a word of warning on that before you think you can just configure one gateway and then start passing it around to the other different version gateways. However, if you've got an SBC 1000 and you have a company of lots of SBC 1000s, you would be able to restore the config onto the other 1000s. But just remember, it takes the IP address of your original backup and takes that onto the other one. So just be aware of that. Just moving down here, I'm not going to do any sort of SIP setup on here. I'm not going to do any fax ports today. This machine, as I said, hasn't got the ASM chip, so it hasn't got the SBA module built in, so I don't need that. IP addresses. So this is where essentially you actually see the initial setup screen come through. So this is where I've specified that my IP address I'm talking to you on at this moment is 220. As you can see, IP address 2 has gone to the 129.2, which is the default going on. My default gate 192.168.1.1, and that's it. Nothing else is set up. I'm not doing any static type stuff. Can do ping Active Directory. So Active Directory, just to talk through that a little bit, that allows you that if you've moved all your users onto Link, so once you enable a user onto Link, it puts some configuration in Active Directory for the user. They're called MSRTP SIP, and in there will be the user's name. What the Sonus Gateway is capable of doing is actually getting a cache of the Active Directory, and instead of you having to configure in rules to find out if a user is on Link and sending the call to Link, it actually uses the Active Directory cache to see if they've got the information in the MSRTP SIP attribute to actually route that call. So it uses AD. Really nice, really slick, good way of actually setting up on bulk a lot of users for Link. So that's really the task pane. Rarely do I ever go into that, apart from this area where I'm wanting to back up, upgrade, etc., etc. Also, as well, if you look on my blog, I have actually done an upgrade guide on how to upgrade from version 2 to version 3 of Sonus SBC as well. So it might be worth taking a look if you're looking for that sort of guide at the moment. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into the settings. This is where we do all our configuration. So what we'll do is we'll move on to that now. So I'll just get a couple of screens ready, and then I'll be back in a second. Okay, so now we've set up our static IP and all our prerequisite information, what we want on our gateway. What we'll do now is we're going to run through the left-hand side panel of the settings tab, and let's start putting a bit of configuration in there. So this is going to be broken down into essentially two elements. Firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to look at setting up the SIP trunk to PureIP and get that working inbound and outbound from Link to PureIP and PureIP to Link. After that, we will have a natural break where we will then look at setting up the ISDN E1 or T1 trunks to either go into legacy PBX as pass-through or fork the calls based on DDI numbers into Link. Equally, what we'll talk through as well is the capability of using the gateway as a medium between a legacy PBX and a Link environment to actually pass internal calls between legacy users and also newly implemented Link users as well. What we'll also use as part of this is the Sonus login tool, which is called LX Logger. We'll certainly look at this as part of the SIP trunk so you can see what the actual call routing is actually doing when it's presenting the call inbound and outbound. But let's just start by setting up some what I class as high-level prereqs on a gateway. So this is more of header information on each element we need. So going down the left-hand side, it starts off with transformation, so it almost follows suit going down the left-hand side, but equally, once you've gone down it, you have to come back up the each folder as well to add further information. So we'll start with transformation, so I'm just going to open that up. As you can see, by default, Sonus have put in a default one called pass-through and touch. What we're going to do is we're just going to highlight it, and I'm going to click on plus, and I'm going to give it a second transformation field called link to PureIP. So link to PureIP, and this is standard. This is what you always do within an implementation of a gateway. I'm going to click on it again and add a second one. As you guessed, this is probably going to be PureIP to link. So this is going to look for numbers coming inbound and outbound. Let's get that in the right format. At this point, I'm going to leave the transformation just with them headers in there. I'm going to close that back up. I'm going to go to my call routing. Again, Sonus have put a default one in there. I'm going to add some new fields. And this one's going to be calls from link. And then a second one. And this one's going to be called calls from PureIP. From PureIP. The next tab, call actions, absolutely not bothered about. Never had to set that up ever for a customer. So for this lab environment, we're not going to do that either. I'm going to click on the signaling group. So this one doesn't have a drop down underneath. If I hover over the top of the create signaling group, you get three options: ISDN, SIP, and CAS. ISDN, as it says, this is the ports which you'd plug your presentation of your PSTN connection into, your Euro ISDN. The SIP is what we're going to look at, and then CAS is for faxes as well. So I'm going to click on the SIP signaling group. It opens up quite a substantial page. I'm not going to change any of the configuration within the page. All I'm going to do is just give it some headers like I mentioned earlier. So PureIP SG for signaling group, and I'm just going to OK that. Or, yeah. SIP server table is required. Come on. Right, okay, so just scratch that. What we need to do is we need to go down to the SIP folder, and we need to go to SIP server table, highlight this, and let's add our SIP server table, kind of in reverse a little bit. So link SE, and I'm going to say mediation service. So all I'm saying here is the SIP server table is my link front end, standard edition, and the mediation service, which is co-located on that. I'm also going to click on it again, and I'm going to put PureIP SIP server slash service. So I've created them. So now we can jump back to our signaling group again and highlight the SIP one in the middle. And we're going to call this one PureIP signaling group, as we did before. PureIP SG. The SIP server table. Okay, so even though we've created our SIP server tables, what we need to do is we just need to present something into each of these for it to be identifiable within the signaling group. So I'm just going to click on the link standard edition mediation service, and all I'm going to do in there is type 10.1.1.1 just to add it in, and in the PureIP SIP server I'm going to do exactly the same and put 1.1.1.1 in there as well. Now if we go back to the signaling group as we was before, and we click on the SIP signaling group option, give this a name of PureIP SG, and as you can see now there is options in there, but we're not going to set them at this very moment. We're just going to OK that message, and that creates that. And and then we're going to click back and we're going to create another signaling group called link signaling group. So link SG. Great, okay, so at this point we've got all our high level information, what we need in there. So we need to now start putting a little bit more of the elements together to make sure it all works. So if I went to the signaling group, let's continue on this thread. We'll start here. I'm going to click on the link signaling group, and I'm going to say that how it all works. I should say this before we just start doing any real config is the signaling group, the call routing, and the transformation, and the SIP server all work together. They've all got to be joined. So this is a point now where we start putting the dots together and making it so it actually routes out or routes in via the signaling group. So it comes in on the signaling group, it looks at the call routing, looks at the number being presented, and then it sends it out over the SIP server table to where it needs to go. So that's the kind of the route it takes. So for the SIP link signaling group, the call routing table I want it to use is the calls from link. So that's where the signal's coming in from, and I wanted to look at calls from link. I also then want it to go to the SIP server table of the link mediation service, and we're just going to OK that for the time being, and we'll just go and change the PureIP one. Still a little bit more what we want to do on that, but I'm just putting the small bits and pieces together at this moment to try and make it understandable. So the next one, the PureIP one, again, I want it to go from calls from PureIP, and the SIP server table this time I want it to be the PureIP SIP server table, and click OK on that. Now that we're on the PureIP signaling group, what I'm going to do is I'm going to present into this signaling group where the IP address of where this call's established. So first thing I'm going to do is the listening ports. We're not talking on UDP56, so I'm going to just get rid of that. And I'm also going to add the IP address of where we're getting the information from. So for PureIP for myself, it's 83.245.1.154. Let me just triply check that because I don't want us to make a mistake and for it to fail. 83.245.1.154. That's excellent. Okay, so that's that in there, and I can apply that. Just to really finish off on the signaling group, really, I'm leaving the default media. I'm leaving everything else as default. The only thing I might just change actually is the number of channels, just so it makes it a little bit more presentable on screen so you can understand what it's actually doing. Equally, you can start setting up round robin and longest idle between different servers and such forth if you really wanted to, and also call admission control if you want to. So you can go to quite a length of putting further configuration in there, natting if you need to nat because your firewall can't do it properly. Certainly I've seen that within the checkpoint environment that doesn't work always. I'm not bothered about changing any sort of the message information going out from the Sonus to PureIP. I'm happy for it to go out as it is. So really at this point we're kind of done on the signaling group for PureIP. So let's just triple OK that, and we're just going to jump into the link one. So let's open that up. So we've already populated our routing table, our SIP server table. All we need to do here is put in, again, let's get rid of the UDP and let's just put in there our front end. So 192.168.1.51 is the link front end. OK that, apply that. And there we go. So that's all set up now. Lovely. So I'll just minimize that and we'll go on to the next area. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to jump back up to the top now. As you can see, it's almost top to bottom, then bottom back up to the top with the element of a little bit in the middle as well. So there's no real structure to it in my real opinion, and if you don't know what you're doing, it can become quite messy. So I'm going to click on the transformation link to PureIP. I'm going to add a new transformation in here, and I'm going to call this calls from link to PureIP. So calls from link to PureIP. I'm going to set it as optional, not mandatory, and the called is bracket dot star. Bracket means allow anything to come in, and I'm just going to say pass through. So because it is a SIP trunk, and I know PureIP can accept E164, I'm going to send it from link as E164 straight through. So I'm going to OK that. And I'm going to now go to the second one, PureIP to link. I'm going to click on plus, just drag that over again. So this one is calls from PureIP to link. So this is the opposite way round. So again, I'm allowing anything to come in, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say +/1. The reason why I'm doing +/1 is because they're so PureIP, I should say, not there. PureIP are passing the number as 44, and I wanted to normalize to +44 when it goes into link environment to match up with my user. So equally, if you wanted to, if this was an E1 or T1, you might be just passing the last 3 digits of the DDI number. You would want to normalize, so you'd essentially put in 4419248442/1, which will be the 3 or 4 digits or whatever it is. But for me, I know it's already coming in as E164, so I've put them rules in now, so they're essentially good to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to drop down the list. We can minimize the transformation at this moment, and we'll go to the call routing, and this is calls from link. We're going to jump into first, so I'm going to create a new one, a new rule or entry, I should say, and this one's called calls from link to PureIP. And it's enabled. The transformation I'm going to be looking at is link to PureIP. As we've stated up here, that's what it's going to be doing. And the signaling group, which we're going to select, is the PureIP signaling group, because this is saying it's a call from link coming out, and we want it to go to this signaling group. So that's that one done. I'm not going to really do anything else with that. I don't need to be aware of doing any quaz on this element, because for myself in my lab it's going over the internet, so there's no point in doing quaz anyway. But if you had a dedicated MPLS trunk for it, you might want to add a bit of quaz in there if you wish. We're just going to now move on to the calls from PureIP, so another plus, and this one is the in reverse. So this is calls from PureIP to link. So we have to drop this down, and this is going to be PureIP to link. And guess what? We have to select the link signaling group this time. Again, I'm not bothered about any of this sort of stuff. So just for your awareness, medium means the ALO or ULO transcoding. By default, Sonus set it as both are enabled. ALO is Europe, ULO is America. So like I say, by default, both are enabled, so we're good on that. So we've put in our routing table. We don't need to do anything else with the routing at this moment. So now let's move on to our SIP servers. Okay, so we can close signaling because we're done on signaling. So the first SIP server I'm going to look at is the link SIP server. If you remember, we put all the ones in here. Just open that back up, and we're going to say that the link SIP server is 192.168.1.51, typo, 1.51. We're talking on TCP. to it. I'm going to put the transport SIP option. So what this actually means is any packets will get sent as a am I alive transport to make sure that the front end is alive. And what you can make it do in terms of a gateway is if it starts or if it stops getting signals from your link environment, you can set up multiple SIP server endpoints to start sending calls to different destinations if you want. So that starts becoming quite advanced, but there is certainly clients I've been dealing with who've got multiple different ways of routing calls in. So either you can route it into another link pool, link mediation server. You can also send the call from one gateway to another gateway if you require. And if you've got a gateway with SBA capabilities, you can also send the call into that gateway to users sat within the SBA if you've got that requirement as well. So it's quite a lot you can do. Equally, you can just send the call back out to your SIP trunk provider and send it into a secondary route anyway over the internet if needs be as well. So quite a lot you can do. So let's just apply that, and let's just now go to the SIP PureIP SIP server. We gave this one all the ones as well, so we know that it is 83.255.245.1.154. Again, they're listed on TCP 5060. I'm going to tell it to send SIP options to that as well. So now let's just have a recap to make sure we've not missed anything. So essentially all our config's done for SIP. So let's just go down, and we're going to start with the signaling group. So PureIP is looking at the routing calls from call routing table of calls from PureIP, and it's looking at the SIP server table PureIP in there, and we've got the IP address in there as well. And because it's got the SIP, sorry, just scroll down, calls from PureIP in here, click on the routing table, and that's going to route it from to link. So just to try and decipher that in our brains a little bit. So the call's going to come in, it's going to hit the PureIP signaling group, and it's going to hit because it knows about this IP address here and also the port it's talking on. It then looks up, and the SIP server table is the one we set with the same IP address. It's going to look at the call routing table of calls from PureIP. That call routing table then, let me just expand that, looks at the transformation and seeing if it can match on the number coming in. So that looks at the transformation of PureIP to link. So as you remember, we put it's going to allow anything in and put a plus in it. And then just jumping back to the call routing table. And then it's going to pass the call to the signaling group of the link signaling group, which is down here. The link signaling group is here, and that is looking at the mediation server of link and the IP address of link. So then in reverse, let's take a call from link, comes in over the SIP server table mediation. The mediation server is here. If you remember, it's going to look at the link signaling group, but it's going to look at the call routing table from calls from link. The calls from link routing table then looks at the transformation. Transformation of link to PureIP and sends it off to the signaling group of PureIP, which then is the IP address of the PureIP server. So absolutely clear as mud for everybody, that, but fairly straightforward once you've done this a few times. So interestingly, you see that we changed one of our PureIP signaling groups to be 5 channels, but we actually left our link one to be 6. So let's just jump back and change that again and make that 5. So they're both 5 now. So what we'll do now is we'll try and do a couple of calls in and see what happens. So now let's make a couple of calls. So firstly, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump to my link front end, which is set up. So if you can remember, we set up all the configuration as part of the original setup in Link, so that it was the media gateway, the trunking, telling it to go via the link control panel to the root and go to the media gateway. We've now set up the media gateway to say if it gets any calls in from Link to send them out to PureIP. So at this point it should be as simple as typing in a number into our link client and the call should route. So I've made the screen just so you can see both sides. So what we expect to see is I'll type a number in here, click to call it, and we should see some magic happening on the green tutti fruities, as what they're called in the UK for some people. The Smarties, the presents, or the signalling. So I'm going to type in my mobile number 07739 7888860. Just going to double click and hopefully you should hear a message. You can see the numbers now presenting from presenting received at PureIP. So that is ringing, but let me just stop that bit. And the reason why I'm stopping it is because you can't hear it. So I'll just cancel that and just the volume isn't turned up on my mobile, which never helps. Right, the mobile's turned up again, so let's just type that number in again. So 07739 7888860, double click, and this time again presenting, receiving at PureIP. PureIP will be pushing it through their side now. And you should be able to hear that music ringing now. So if I click to answer, you can see the green dots have gone blue now to say that there's a connection. If I right and click over the top, it'll tell you the call information. So there you go, there's my mobile number, and that's the link user who made the call. Okay, so there we go. That's how you do the call. So equally, let's do that the opposite way around to make sure that, as you can see, it's got all the bits and pieces. Let's do that the opposite way around to make a call from external into the link client as well. So let's just cancel that off the system. So we've dropped that. So our link client is ready. So I'm just going to, on my mobile number, 01924 842 667. So I've pressed commit on my mobile phone. You should see it come into the gateway. It's come in, it's accepted. Interestingly, I've got simultaneously ringing here, so it's also ringing my second user, which is actually not even turned on at the moment, which is my wife in my lab. I've clicked to commit. You can see the blue dots have gone to say that we've got a connection. So let's just cancel that. So again, let's do that again very quickly. So out of the link client, I can ring 07739 7888860, and call's been sent. Should hear my mobile ringing. There you go. Let's drop that. And the opposite way around, ring from my mobile back to the link client, press commit. Should see it jump onto the Sonus gateway and into link. There we go. And just click anywhere to accept. Okay, so that's that, but let's just take this one step further, like we said before, we actually have the natural break in terms of the T1E1. So you might be in a position where you're thinking, right, okay, situation is calls aren't routing as you'd expect, or the number's not presenting it the way you would have expected it to present, so you want to set up some login. So let's do that. So we go back to the settings tab. We can really collapse all that now because we're kind of finished with that for the time being. We go down to the login configuration and we need to set up our remote log server. So just going to click on that tab. So the remote log server, don't think of the server what's going to pick up this information as a server. So I'm running this just on my Windows 8 machine, this software. So it's just an executable which you can install. And when it says remote log server, it just means the place where you're going to read the log. So I'm going to click on plus, just drag that over, and I'm going to say the global log level is debug. I'm going to say its IP address is 192, oh my goodness, 192.168.1.222 because that's my Windows 8 machine. I'm going to be listening on port 514 on UDP and click OK. So let's, oops, I had to click twice and that's why it came up with that error. So that's in there. Then what you have to do is you have to select the subsystems you want to actually do the login on. So there's about 3 or 4, maybe 5, which I'd always do. So the call routing service is one. Set it to debug, and it's got our log server 222. Okay, that. And the next one is, oops, it is the common call control. I always do that. Third one is common transport service, debug. Always do that. The next one I'm going to core switching and routing, debug. As you can see, we're putting a few debugs in here. So you'd only do this if you had a particular issue which you were trying to fact find on. I'm going to do the ISDN protocol, and this is the one you'd need for the T1E1. As I'm not going to put any T1E1 connections into it, I'm not going to select it at this very moment. And the last one is, because we're talking on SIP, put the SIP stack in there as well. So just a word of warning at this point, an SBC 1000 is absolutely fine to do this because it's logging its information and it's storing it to its own in memory before it actually sends it out. One thing of real warning though, I have seen an SBC fail in memory leakage because the debug's been set and it's been set to active and it's just been filling the memory with login information. So if you are running debug, ensure that you run it, but then ensure that you don't ensure that you turn it off essentially, and you do that in the debug level trace, or you'd actually click on enable to turn it off. So now we've got our debug set. Let's just open up the LX tool. So this is the net LX. So it's net because it used to be the Sonus. There is now a newer version. I think it's .28 is the latest version, which actually is Sonus, but I'm still running the older one just because I haven't got around to actually doing the upgrade yet. I'm going to click on syslog server and I'm going to say listen on IP 222. Because that's where we're sending it. If you remember, we put 514 and we're going to say start listening. You might get some SIP options coming in through here before I do anything. So let's just leave it a quick second, see if it actually does start listening on anything. And I'm just going onto my mobile now. So what I'm going to do, I haven't done anything yet, so that's just saying that it's talking the Sonus gateway is talking to our front end because that's the name of my front end on port 5060. So we know that our signaling is working perfectly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ring that number now. So just make note we're on to line 440. Ring into our link environment. Watch this line usage shoot up. Right, so we're up to 2000 line now. So if we go back to our link front end, as you can see over here, it is actually ringing it. So I'm just going to end that. I'm going to stop listening. I'm going to click on Analyze. This opens up the original window, and as you can see, it's got all the information about what we're doing. You can simply jump into each one, and it tells you what it's doing at each point. And further information, so you can drill into the invite and see what it's using, what RTP maps it's associated with itself. Call is being forwarded, so that's actually ringing the second Victoria Smith client. It's telling us it's ringing. And also, if you go to this routes for the ISDN T1s, you can actually see the further information on what rules it's actually using as well as part of that. So that is the login tool. So from there you can really see what's actually happening on the call and where you might have a potential issue or not. As you can see there, it's talking to the 83245.154 address. So that's it. So this is what I'd probably class as a natural breaking point now. And what we'll do is in a second, we'll come back and we'll configure the T1 and E1s to present the PSTN channels into. Okay, so now let's jump on to our gateway again, and let's just minimize our link client, and we're going to just go to node interface. So we're absolutely finished on SIP now, so we're looking at the T1E1 type stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to system timing. So this is absolutely key to how E1 and T1 connections actually use stuff. So system timing, clock source, network. And I'm going to say that it's going to get its clock source from primary 7.1, which is the port 1. And secondary, I'm going to tell it to get from 7.2 if needs be. Just configure that. So you always have to do that. So that's the first thing. So again, let's just close that up. So we're done on the system part there. We're back to our signaling group again, and we need to do things exactly the same as what we did before. So we're going to click this time on the ISDN signaling group, and we're going to say the signaling group here is called, let's say, pseudo name BT, British Telecom, ISDN, port 1 signaling group. As you can see, it says it's T1E1, so we need to sort that out actually. So let's just, oops, that's just gone to the back of the screen. Let's just OK that. And so the T1E1, if you remember, is the Europe or US capability. So I'm just going to go back to ports, node interfaces, ports, click on the 7.1, and I'm going to change this to E1. And you'll see these, and change port 2 to an E1 as well, because we're in Europe. What's also of interest is you don't need to change any of this at this very moment, unless you was doing it using them ports as a CAS, a fax machine, as ports. But as we're not, we can simply put that as that. Okay, so we are now set as E1. So let's just, jump back to our signaling group, close up our node interfaces, and as you can see, it now says E1 7.1 as well on there. So we're going to go to port 2 and create a second one. So this one, we can say in this example that our port 2 is going to be called, let's pick a PBX of any choice. Let me think. This is an Avaya in this example. Avaya ISDN signaling group. So I'm going to actually give it port 1 signaling group. So what I'm doing here, in this scenario, if you had multiple ports, so you might have lots of ISDN channels coming in, trunks coming into your environment. I'm almost matching what is mirrored to what. So the BT line coming in, I want it to present to the Avaya line going out on port 2, which they match. So that is coming in and going through to the PBX. In this example, so let's just OK that. Oh, what did I miss there? Yep, sorry. So forgot to set it to Euro ISDN. If you were doing QSIG or anything else, and Japanese NI2, you set it here. But I'm going to do, and again, that if you had a T1, that I'd say differently. Just interested to know what I'd actually set it to here, so I need to just go back and change that to Euro as well. Okay, so they will be marked as down because I haven't got anything plugged into them. So if just as another side key takeaway is if you're doing a pass through, so this is where we've got the gateway upstream, the PSTN presents into port 1, out of port 2 is the pass through to the Avaya. That has to be an RJ48C cable. There's two prongs which are crossed over, so you need to just be aware of that, or else your service won't come up. Okay, so now let's move on to the next part. The next part, I'm going to jump back up to transformation. I'm more interested now in the pass-through and touch. So this is where a call would come in, and I'm going to use this to pass through from PSTN through to our legacy PBX, what we've just set up. So I'm quite happy with this pass through. Anything coming in, pass straight through. What I'm also going to add is something else as well. So I'm going to click on the plus, and I'm going to set the transfer capability to speech. Capability to speech. The reason why I'm going to do this is a lot of PBXs aren't capable of understanding what is being presented to it. So we need to be quite clever in the way we do this. So I just need to transfer that, and we're going to say to speech. So what we're saying is anything coming in, I want it to pass it through on the way through to the PBX as speech. Again, like I say, it's just something we need to do, and something I've seen as particular issues in the past. Also as well, I'm just going to change the pass-through and touch one from mandatory, because if it were mandatory, it wouldn't read the second one. And I'm going to change that to optional as well. Okay, so we're quite happy at that point. So we're done on the transformation. We don't need to do anything else. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to look at our call routing, because we need to set some call routes up now for our ISDN channels. So let's just click the transformation to close that, and we're going to click on a call routing table, and we're going to put another one. And this one is calls from BT. And we're going to create another one. Oops. And this one's calls from Avaya. Okay. So now we've done that, let's now put a bit more config onto them too. So click on the first one, calls from BT. We'll click on add. So this one we're going to say calls from BT to Avaya, and the transformation we're going to use is the pass-through and touch, because that's what we said. And the signaling group we're going to add is the Avaya signaling group. So it's coming through, passing through, and off it goes. So that's all that's going to do. And the opposite way around, calls from Avaya is going to create a new one, and this is calls from Avaya to BT. To BT. So BT, for American people, that's British Telecom in the UK, the main vendor of all things telecoms, SIP trunks, and because they've got such a monopoly in the UK, they have to, by regulatory rules, allow other companies to use their framework. So lots of other companies use the backbone of the BT infrastructure. I'm sure it'll be the same in the US. But there we go. So pass-through and touch again. So this is coming back out of Avaya. I'm just saying to the gateway, send it through. I'm not really bothered what the Avaya is passing me, just send it straight out. And I'm going to say I want to send this out back on port 1 to BT. So essentially for the ISDN, that is it in a nutshell. What we could do, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, we can use the gateway as the kind of the conduit between legacy and the link environment. So in that scenario, we can go back to our calls from Avaya, and what we can do is we can click on add, and we can say, oops, can say in our description, calls from Avaya to link, and we can say use, we'll just set it as that at the moment, pass-through untouched, but we're going to come back and change that. We're going to click on that, and we're going to click on signaling group, and we want to send it to link. So let's just OK that. So what we can do is, let's go back to transformation, and we can say in here, new rule plus, we can say a via to link. Or we can do a via to link, or equally what else we can do is we can say don't use that and just use the same normalization as our PureIP to link one, because that's doing exactly the same. So we're just saying pass it through. So let's just jump back to our calls from a via. So let's just change that. We're going to say use the PureIP to link. So in this scenario, there could be a good case that you want to change that to be a different. So you could say calls to link or something like that, and you could almost generalize it a little bit further if you needed to. Equally, you could set up a second or essentially a third transformation which says calls from a via to a link, and then in there you can actually specify further information. What I mean by that is let's just do that just as an example. So we'll click on transformation, we'll click on plus, and we'll say a via to link. And I'm going to put and yeah, okay, we'll leave it at that actually. A via to link, okay that. We're going to click on the via to link, and we're going to add a rule. So we know that in this one, optional, calls, let's give it a different name, internal calls from a via to link user. So the called number. So at this point, we've got to be aware of what the Avaya system is sending. So one thing you need to do on your Avaya with your Avaya engineer is you've got to tell the Avaya system that number, that extension number that user's trying to ring is no longer is within the Avaya environment. So they need to say, right, okay, it's not in that, so just send it out up the one as the 4 digits, or equally they can say, right, just treat it as an external number. So they might put it as a full number. So for example, they might say the number is 01924 842 668. And what we want to do is we want to say, okay, so if that number comes in at that number, what I want it to do is I want to do plus 44/1. So that's saying anything in that number come in. That's still not going to work for us though in this scenario, because the 0 will go in there as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go across and do top at 0 and take the 0 off, and I've put the 0 on the outside, meaning that I'll put a slash in there. No, I don't need a slash actually, it's not a foreign character. A 0 is on the outside, so it means that anything within the brackets will pass through. So it'll do +44 1924 835 222. So at that point, that rule is that. So we can say calls from a via. Let's go back down here, and we're going to say change that to be a via to link. And OK. Now, what's interesting is at this moment, it always works from top to bottom. So at this moment, any calls coming out of the via will always match on this first rule and send it out to BT over port 1. We want it to do a preliminary check first to make sure it's not a link number what it needs to be sent to. So what I'm going to do is on this little pencil up here, this resequence, I'm going to say this bottom one now needs to go above the pass-through untouched. So what that now is going to do is it'll come in from a via, it'll look to see if it's a link user based on our rule up here in the transformation. If it isn't, what it will do then, it'll look at its second route and just pass it through to BT. So that's where you can actually start slicing and dicing the calls through. Equally, you can do exactly the same from calls from link. So at this moment, we've got the calls from link going to PureIP as a signaling group. Again, we can add a rule in here, route, what says calls from link to a via. So using this as the mechanism to go through, and we can use the same via one if we wanted to, and we can click add, and we can say go off down port, which essentially this is a port 2, and off you go to the link. Sorry, off you go to the Avaya system. Again, these are in the wrong order, so it'll always present and go out to PureIP first. So what we could do is we can flip that using the sequence button. So it'll always check if it's actually a link user trying to ring an Avaya user first. If it isn't, then it'll just go out to PureIP. So that's it for this demonstration. The couple of key takeaways you need to be fully aware of, as we mentioned going through the guide. One is ensure that your login is turned off when you're not using it, so you don't actually bring your gateway down. Other things, what I would use is the default naming standards from the Sonus. I don't think is intuitive enough for you to actually use. So I'd always recommend that you use your own name in which you can understand. There is a wizard as part of the Sonus gateway which will essentially provide you with transformation, routing, naming, and put all your information in. Again, I feel that's quite clunky and poor and doesn't give you naming which is easy to understand further down the road. So I'd always recommend doing a manual install, manual configuration, so you're absolutely fully aware of what your Sonus gateway is doing. Like I say, you can take this to the further levels and deep dive further into it, so you can do multiple routes to multiple gateways from one gateway to another. You can get your link environment to do further trunk routing if you need to. You can set up secondary gateway routing from out of your link environment in case your gateway was down. So you can take it to a really quite a detailed and complex telephony environment if you want to. But for this guide, we'll keep it a little bit high level and make sure everything is working. If you've got any questions, please report back on the comments page on the blog site. I'm always happy to help. I enjoy getting into the mix on telephony, so it's always something of interest. So any questions you've got about how you're working, or if you want any recommendations on a particular scenario, or if you're in the market to try and buy gateways or peripherals or anything like that, SIP trunks, feel free to reach out, and I'm quite happy to help and assist. As of today is the 19th of December. It's probably going to be my last virtual visual video guide, so I wish each and every one of you a pleasant Christmas, and I'll be back early in 2014 with some more guides then. So like I say, any comments, good or bad, hopefully all good, please add on, because it's always nice to know that the stuff I'm doing is proving to be worthwhile. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good Christmas. Bye bye.